with Samuel because Samuel has like another perspective, right? Can you hear me well? Okay. Samuel has another perspective, and you can see all the litigations that are concrete actions having against business, right? And the arguments are human rights. And we want to know what are your biggest experience with that from Cannes, and particularly the human rights argument used in this climate lawsuit against companies, which are the main ones used, and also if you can tell us any particular or relevant case that you see as precedent of this trend.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. First, thanks for the invitation. And maybe as a caveat, I need to say that I'm not a legal expert. I'm here in the capacity of representing a network of more than 200 organizations across Europe, many of which are involved in some of these litigation cases that you mentioned. And maybe, yeah, before diving into the human rights element, I think very top-line assessment of where the climate litigation is standing up to date. I think we are entering in a new phase for climate litigation, in a much more complex phase, I would say. And climate litigation is really on the rise at this point. Last year it was more than 225 new cases filed. And I think there's an element playing in this situation is that there are lots of political shifts going around. So we're in the middle of climate denialism. We are in the middle of a pushback in terms of climate progressive policies. Also, despite being, and we're in COP here, and we know we're listening about NDCs and climate commitments. Despite these commitments, then the implementation doesn't happen, and then litigation is there also to enforce or force a bit this implementation. And also there's a shrinking of civic space, which is very important. And all this is pushing NGOs, but not only NGOs, into the litigation area. So there's a new phase starting for this litigation. That's the first point I wanted to make. Second point I want to make is that the developments in international law are reinforcing these climate obligations with a focus on human rights. And this year we saw very important advisory opinions. On the one hand, we saw the Inter-American Court of Justice advisory opinion, and we also recently listened to the International Court of Justice advisory opinion. Also in May this year, a group of African organizations filed a climate-related petition to the African Court of Human Rights and People's Rights, seeking guidance of what would be the African states' obligations in terms of human rights in light of climate change. So I think this international law is reshaping the climate litigation landscape. That's the second point. Then thirdly, I think it's important to point out that climate litigation in the Global South particularly is in a dynamic of growth. And there are not only NGOs pursuing these cases, there are also some local governments and institutions playing into this field now. Then when it comes to climate litigation against companies, this is also on the growth. Last year, 20% of the new climate litigation cases were against companies. Of course, state litigation still takes the largest percentage, but I think corporate litigation is importantly growing. Another point I want to make is that apex courts, so those courts, the highest courts in the different judiciary systems, are playing a pivotal role in making these litigation cases forward. And there also particularly it's important to say that when it comes to corporate litigation, they usually have a higher successful rate compared to state cases in the apex when they come to apex courts. And finally, maybe important to say that the polluter pays principle is expanding, both in scope and also in the regional geographically. It's been in the last decade, it's been like 80 cases being filed. One case that I think it's been an inflection point, very important to mention, because also one of our members, German Watch, was supporting this case, was this case of Saul Luciano Yuya, a farmer and mountain guide Peruvian person that sued the German coal company RWE on the understanding that their activities were, and their contribution to global warming was partially responsible for the melting of the glacier in the area where he lived and worked. And then, yes, it was confirmed by the court that companies, in principle, can be held legally liable for the harm caused by their contribution to climate change. So I think this was a very important ruling this year. Then when it comes to the human rights as an entry point, I think it's important to say, and I think, Haley already mentioned this very clearly, that the climate emergency is a profound human rights crisis. So we need to start from that assumption. I mean, the climate change is impacting human rights on all levels: political rights, labor rights, social rights, in all senses. And this is something that we in the NGO community have been pointing out very clearly for years, that there cannot be climate justice without human rights. And then, yeah, this is not only impacting the current generation human rights, but also the future generation human rights. And in that sense, the recent advisory opinion from the International Court of Justice has been very clear there as well. So this link between human rights and climate change, I think, has been very clearly established already by the United Nations, by different courts, saying that climate change affects the right to life, the right to private and family life, the right to access to food, right to access to water, the right to a healthy environment. So this is very well established, and in this sense, rights-based litigation is playing a key role in shaping and influencing national legal and political frameworks. So I think we are to see civil society keep using litigation to push for systemic both decarbonization and human rights improvement, and not only in high emission sectors. And we have here representatives from one of our members, Milieu Defensie, friends of the Netherlands, and they just filed a case very recently, against a bank, ING. So it's not only emission sectors, like I said. So it's about all the across financial value chains. What's important, and we're going to be increasingly seeing these kind of cases. Like I said, international courts are helping frame this issue of climate change as a human rights issue, and I think is especially important is what the Inter-American Court of Human Rights said. Hello? Yeah, said. It said that clearly companies have the obligation and responsibilities with respect to climate change and their impacts on human rights. So it was very blunt on addressing this obligation by companies. So what I think these litigation cases are leading to is to a move or shift from soft law to a hardening of this soft law in terms of due diligence standards. So that meaning that companies will have to conduct rigorous climate due diligence across all the operations and value chains to identify, prevent, mitigate, and also account for climate impacts. And this also applies to human rights. So, building on what Haley mentioned, this is also meaning obligations for companies in terms of strengthening the corporate human rights due diligence. Unfortunately, this is not what we're seeing at the government level in terms of measures. We recently saw in the European Union how there's an attempt to dilute the obligations of companies in terms of due diligence. So we saw a proposal of an omnibus trying to dilute the climate sustainability due diligence directive and also the climate sustainability reporting directive this year. So governments are not paying attention to what the courts are saying, I would say. And you asked me to ask a specific case, and I think, again, coming back to Milieu Defensie, who was here present in the room, I think one noticeable case is the case of Milieu Defensie versus Shell, against Shell. So Milieu Defensie lodged a complaint against Shell, understanding that their business model and the emissions associated to it was causing dangerous climate change and then threatening Dutch citizens, and then Shell would be in the breach of the Dutch law obligation of duty of care of their activities. But what's important for this conversation is that these plaintiffs allege that Shell, by knowingly contributing to climate change, they were also violating fundamental rights that were recognized by the European Convention on Human Rights, namely the right to life and the right to family and private life. So I think this is, putting again the focus on human rights, and then the court, agreed that this duty of care under the Dutch law also encompasses the human rights. So I think it's important, very important case. Really, we're really thankful to our members that are pushing this litigation way forward. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, yeah, I think it's so important what you said.